It's now time for The Journal, WBGU-TV's award-winning public affairs program, with your host, Steve Kendall. This is where your community matters. Local people, local issues.
Hello and welcome to The Journal. I'm Steve Kendall. On July 21st, 1969, people around the world watched as Neil Armstrong became the first person to set foot on the moon. Now, as we approach the 50th anniversary of that event, the people of Wapakoneta, Ohio, Neil Armstrong's hometown, have a large variety of events scheduled to commemorate that event and celebrate the life of Neil Armstrong. Here from the 2019 Celebration Committee are Joshua Little and Deb Zwez. I want to thank you both for being here.
Thanks for
having me. And as I said, it's the 50th anniversary year, but Wapakoneta has celebrated Neil Armstrong and space activity and all of the things that go into that for years and years. This isn't just the first time you guys have gone down this road.
No, it's not. There's been Festival of Flight. We now have the Summer Moon Festival. So all of the anniversary years are celebrated as well as every year.
Right. And those events have been every summer, and a lot of activities revolved around those. And obviously the 50th anniversary is one of those benchmark years, so this is one of those special kind of events. So talk a little about some of the things that are going to be going on and how this all came together, because this isn't something you plan the week before it happens, obviously.
No, we've been, as volunteers, been meeting for almost 3 years now, and certainly building upon the great work of the past volunteers and the past celebrations. We have a lot of time, talent, treasure that's gone in to make this year especially very special, and we've got a lot of activities, and certainly, you know, from a community book read to obviously the week parade, kind of repeating what was a parade from 1969, and just a lot of different things in between there, and also, you know, anyone can come down anytime. We have a great museum that's dedicated to Neil and the space program that people can get educated on any day. But there's a lot of activities we're excited about. So
now, how many? Because obviously we're talking 1969, 50 years ago. How many people are still around? I mean, you obviously have some people who are still around from that time that you can talk to. Will some of them be participating or involved in some of these events? People who knew Neil Armstrong in his days when he went to school there, that sort of thing?
Well, I imagine that we will be in contact with, you know, some of those people in the community. There are, you know, contemporaries of Neil who are still, you know, active in our community. So sure.
Yeah. Now, what are some of the things that are going to be happening around this event? Because obviously, as you said, the museum's there 365 days a year, a great place to visit. Real close to I-75, very easy to get to, and a lot of great displays, a lot of wonderful artifacts and historical things. But so what are some of the things that are going to be different about this year's festival compared to previous events during the summer?
Well, the celebration of the moon landing and the 50th anniversary really kind of kicked off in October when we had a party to celebrate the debut of the movie First Man.
Right.
Which, if you've seen that, that's a kind of a biopic of Neil Armstrong. And so we've just continued from there. In January, we're going to have a community book read where we are focusing on the first Astronaut Wives Club by author Lily Koppel. And so we're encouraging people throughout the community to read that book, and there are a number of activities surrounding that, including a visit from the author. So we're really excited about that. And then from January through July, you know, almost every week there's something. We've got the Vatican astronomer coming in to do a presentation. There are concerts planned. We've had a sculptor come in, because there are a number of there are actually going to be 3 new statues of Neil Armstrong in the community. And so Mike Tizzano has come in and he's shown the community his process in creating the sculpture that's going to be downtown. So he has another visit planned, I believe, in March. So again, as we go on up to the July dates, you know, there are things planned, but things really kick off on July 12th, where we kind of kick off that 10-day celebration with a balloon rally. So we have hot air balloons coming in. And we just go on from there.
Yeah. Now you mentioned, it's interesting because you mentioned the First Wives Club, because, you know, we hear a lot about the astronauts, the people people that were there, but a lot of times, especially movies and things about the families, are always sort of ancillary, very secondary. So this is a focus on the wives of the astronauts and what their lives were like in terms of, because this still was incredibly dangerous work when they were doing it. I mean, it was the unknown. So that probably has some really interesting stories in it too about what it was like for them.
It does.
They're sending their husbands, brothers, fathers, people off to this really this unknown situation. So that'll be an interesting presentation as well.
Yeah, and it's a story that isn't told all the time.
Sure.
We focus on the event and all the great things and the achievements of the space program, but it wouldn't have happened without those wives and their families who are supporting these astronauts. And Ms. Koppel does a great job of telling that story and giving true life kind of experiences and shade to was a great experience. So.
Yeah, because one of the things with Neil Armstrong, and it comes out in the biopic too, he was a very low-key sort of guy. So we know him. I mean, we know him from being the first person to step on the moon, but the rest of his life is sort of. He kept it kind of in the background, which on purpose, nothing wrong with that. A lot of people would be much more out in the front. So there's a lot of stories, a lot of background there that sort of remains untold. And this is an opportunity probably too to get a little flavor of what it was like as he grew up in Wapakoneta with all of the activities. Because I believe, isn't there a like a tour of some of the, like where he went to school and his house and things like that that's part of this?
Yeah, the school is still there. Well, it's now an apartment complex, but the building is still there. And actually, the Rotary Club of Wapakoneta, along with the Ohio History Connection and the Armstrong 2019 Committee, put a historical marker outside the Armstrong boyhood home, and it was a great experience and a great opportunity to recognize that home that shaped him as a young kid.
Sure. Yeah, because Wapakoneta remains a very nice small town, a small town, even smaller back in the 60s, well, the time when he grew up there. And so you look at that, and here's a kid grew up in Ohio from a very small town who achieves this great event, and it still resonates 50 years later with people. When you started to plan this, what were some of the, I mean, this is obviously a very significant event. What were some of the things that you kind of evolved into? What were some of the ideas and then the things that actually came to fruition? Because you can go a pretty wide range of activities.
We laugh and we say we are this ragtag group of volunteers that are just trying to plan a fun party, but it really is a lot more complicated than that. I mean, a lot of people came to the table from the beginning. A lot of community leaders, a lot of people who are stakeholders in Neil Armstrong's history and what it means to our community. And so, we have representatives of the museum, of the Travel and Tourism Association, of Economic Development, the Chamber of Commerce, different media groups, the library. So again, just a lot of people, and people have continued to come to the table to be a part of this. And so, we knew going in what the festivals looked like. What did the Summer Moon Festival look like from the museum's point of view and from the Chamber's point of view, and how could we just grow and expand that to incorporate. And in order to do that, because of all the ideas that came to the table, now we're kicking off on July 12th, and we won't end until July 22nd. So.
Yeah, I think that, you talked earlier about Wapakoneta being a small town. People are incredibly, and should be, prideful of our history and our heritage, especially related to Neil Armstrong and how proud we are of our native son. And I think people are excited. They want to get involved, and they want to have as Deb alluded to, a party and to celebrate this achievement for not just Neil and our country and the world, and mankind, but also for our small little piece of it in Wapakoneta.
Sure, yeah, because it was a different time. It was a time of the Cold War, that sort of thing, and so it resonates in any number of different ways as to what it meant to different people. We'll be back in just a moment. We're talking about the 2019 celebration that goes on commemorating the 50th anniversary of the first man on the moon. We'll be back in Journal in just a moment. Thank you for staying with us here on the Journal. We're talking with a couple of representatives from the 2019 Celebration Committee, which is, of course, working on the 50th anniversary, and it's already started, of the first man on the moon, Neil Armstrong, Wapakoneta, Ohio. And we've touched a little bit about Neil's background there, but the reality is his growing up there, there's a lot of background there that probably until people may have seen that biopic movie didn't know some of the background, because after you've been the first man on the moon, a lot of the other stuff kind of recedes, is a little lower. But he had an interesting life before he became an astronaut, before he became the first man on the moon. So talk a little about some of the things that his background as a person in Wapakoneta before all of this happened.
Well, I think that, you know, part of it is how much the small town shaped him, and how much, you know, eventually he and his family would have shaped our town. And, you know, his parents lived there for quite a while after his achievement and the impact they made. But, you know, there's all these stories and legends, and, you know, that which most of them are true, you know, that he got his pilot's license before he got his driver's license, and you know, the things he was building model airplanes, and how important that was to him, and how important aviation was to him. And you know, we talk a lot about how you know, he really put his country and this achievement above his family and his and really his own safety just to make this achievement. And so, I mean, yeah, he made a big impact. So.
Yeah. Now, when you talk about that, because the commitment is incredible, and his background, obviously, you know, an engineering student at Purdue, lots of things. There's lots of things that unless you really dive into that, you don't think about. You know, an astronaut before the Apollo series. I mean, you don't remember? Yes, he did Gemini. He did other things besides go to the moon. Those kind of stepped down from that a little bit, but they're all incredible achievements. If he'd never set foot on the moon, he'd led an incredible life, even beyond that, up to that point too. When you try to put all of that together, because as you mentioned, I think too, there's legend and then there's fact, and you know, and there's anecdotes, and there's things that become fact simply by repetition. When you were talking about constructing this sort of this particular event around Neil Armstrong, were you able to separate some of the things that the things that people know are true that may not be true, and things that they didn't know that turn out to be true? Anything along those lines at all?
We, you know, really our real point was to commemorate and to celebrate, you know, this great achievement of you know, the moon landing, and you know, it's 50 years have gone by, you know, since that happened, and no better place to do it than Wapakoneta.
Sure.
You know, our native. You know, our native son that we're all so very proud of. You know, we have the museum that stands, you know, in tribute to, you know, his great achievement. And, you know, I think all of the stories and the movie, you know, just goes to show that he was, you know, he was a quiet, kind of unassuming guy who did his job, very humble. You know, who did his job and then went on with his life, and, you know, lived a remarkable life, you know, after his NASA affiliation. You know, he was part of the crew that investigated the space shuttle crash. You know, he was a professor at the University of Cincinnati. You know, he raised children, and you know, just he lived a good, quiet life. Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned the family, because the family's heavily involved in the activities too. Talk a little bit about because obviously they're invested in this as well.
Well, and I think they've been invested for a long time, not just in this year, but they've certainly been invested in the museum and are heavily involved with events that are at the museum, and you know, the sculptures that are going to be throughout the community and at the museum. In his, you know, in his tribute, you know, they're helping to sponsor those and to be involved, as well as, I think, you know, they want to make sure that his legacy continues on for a long time, rightly so.
Sure. Yeah.
His sister came to the gala event that we threw for the movie, and as Josh said, his sons are commissioning the 2 statues that'll be part of the museum complex. So, you know, and it's nice that they're still in contact with people in our community as well, because as Josh said, I think they really just want to ensure that
the legacy is held appropriately, and for them, I mean, it has to have been, and again, we're into an area that, you know, none of us are well versed in probably, but to be the sons of the first man on the moon, that's an interesting life to live too. That oh, by the way, my dad was the first man on the moon. Just saying, you know, just passing that along, or to be a student in one of his classes had to be. By the way, my professor is the first guy on the moon. It had to be an incredible thing. But as you guys said, he was available whenever his country required service or needed him, the investigation of the space shuttle catastrophe, that sort of thing. And yet, to the rest of the time, just went about his business like a regular person, when he really wasn't a regular person, but he lived a life like that. And that says something too about him beyond the duty and everything that he did. As you started to construct this, I mean, were there things that as you looked at this, areas that, you know, people were saying, hey, this is things that are important and other things that maybe you thought were important going in that turned out not to be? Or was this we had a pretty consistent path to get to the events and the ideas that you wanted to bring forward?
We did a lot of brainstorming in the beginning. You know, what could we do that you know, was connected in some, you know, in some special way. The airport, for example, the Armstrong Airport. I don't think I mentioned that their airport manager is part of our, you know, kind of steering committee. So he's planning events, you know, as well with the Aranca. So he is, you know, he's tying that. The air travel part of it into this celebration. You know, the book read's not necessarily something that you would think about when you would. Bringing in the Vatican astronomer, it's you know, kind of out there, but you know, we had the opportunity to do that through the connection with the Catholic Church in our community. So you know, we leapt at that. We have a number of bus tours coming into the community, and so there are some things that are planned, you know, for those visitors. 1969 dinner experience. We have
at Neil's church, at his family's church.
Wow.
Because they're very proud of their connection, you know, as being the home church of the Armstrong family. We have somebody who's coming in to interpret. You know, he's a Neil Armstrong interpreter, so kind of a first person.
So he'll sort of do almost like a one-person Neil Armstrong sort of show, kind of not. Wow. Yeah. Now that'll be interesting, because that'll be a chance for people who didn't really know him directly in any particular forum to get a feel for what his personality was like a little bit more than what we've seen and read and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I believe you can ask him questions and he'll try and respond as to what
in person.
The
balloon rally that used to be years ago was part of the festival flight at the museum, and so you know, brought that back, and you know, kind of a bid to nostalgia. So
Well, when we come back, we can talk a little bit more about some of the other parts of this too, because obviously it's a huge event and a very extensively planned event with a lot of activities. Back in just a moment here on the Journal with the celebration of Neil Armstrong's 50th anniversary of his first steps on the moon. We'll be back in just a moment. Thank you for staying with us here on the Journal. 50 years ago in July, Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon, and the town of Wapakoneta, of course, Neil Armstrong's hometown, has a huge celebration plan to commemorate that and celebrate the life of Neil Armstrong. And a couple of representatives from the 2019 Celebration Committee, Deb Zwez and Joshua Little. One of the things that is interesting about this too, back then, and you mentioned media involvement this year and that sort of thing, the environment, because he stayed, as you said, very low-key, very humble, very whatever. Now that would be much more difficult for him to do, given social media, web, all of the ability, video, everything on demand. It would have been a different life for him at that point if this was happening today versus when it happened then. Any indication, I guess, and maybe that's a question somebody will ask the person who comes on to do the Neil Armstrong sort of presentation, how would he have handled that, do you think? I mean, do you guys have would he have still been able to maintain that kind of humble, low-key thing? I mean, it sounds like he would have been able to, but it would have been a lot more difficult. And I guess with regard to that too, have you gotten attention from external media, people beyond Ohio, that sort of thing? I mean, obviously, national story, international story. Have you guys, that sort of thing's going to happen too?
It will, and we did for the gala. You know, we did have some Ohio attention to the fact that we were throwing that party. You know, when the movie debuted. But we know from past experience on those significant anniversary dates. You know, 25, 35, 40. You know, the community does get a lot of national and international attention. I mean, there's already been, I believe, a documentary crew in the community, and that happens every year. Newspapers from France, from England, come in. So yes, we're not kidding when we say we got to be ready to deal with that.
Yeah, and I imagine you're expecting too in this year, even outside of the actual things that are going on, probably increased activity in town from people just visiting, because it is the 50th year, that sort of thing. So everybody's prepared and ready for that as much as you can be.
Well, we're getting there. We're getting there. And as I said, we have a number of bus tours planned. Our Convention and Visitors Bureau, I mean, actively sought out those companies who plan bus tours to encourage them to come to Wapakoneta to do, you know, a variety of different activities to increase the awareness. But yes, we anticipate the museum will see an influx of visitors, you know, because of the anniversary year. And, you know, as we go throughout the year and we get closer to the actual anniversary date, we're anticipating that as well.
Well, and there's, you know, there's certainly, you know, the museum is a focal point of our community and a great piece of it, and it's one piece as well of a bigger puzzle. There's great restaurants and shops, especially downtown in our downtown specialty shop areas, and it's a great place to spend a day or you know, and to see the community that made Neil what he was, and many other great leaders.
Yeah, there's a lot more to Wapakoneta than just the museum.
Yeah, it's a great piece,
it's
but
a good
it's
thing,
one piece.
But it's a nice step in the door to see the rest of the town and the area, because it's beautiful country down there. It's that rolling Ohio
on the river on the Allglaze.
Yeah, exactly, and it's farm country, and yet it's also, you know, has a little bit of urban to it as well. And I guess, you know, the community at large obviously knows they have to deal with this, because sometimes when towns have these kind of events, for the local people, sometimes it's not, it can be a little tricky, because suddenly large numbers of visitors show up, and yet, but this community seems like it's embracing that, because it is, it belongs to, they understand it belongs to more than just Wapakoneta.
And we do have within the community, we have a really good working relationship, you know, all the way around. People from the museum send these visitors downtown, and vice versa. You know, we're coming up with a schedule of events. After the first of the year, we'll have, you know, a schedule of events that we will share with all of the businesses along Bell Fountain Street and throughout the community, so that when somebody comes in and says, what is there to do in Wapakoneta, or what are you doing, you know, in July to celebrate the anniversary, we can hand them this schedule and say, look at this, look at all these things.
And we do have a website too, sorry.
Okay, I was just going to ask,
and a
Facebook page. So there's a great opportunity to get those schedules and check out Wapakoneta.
And they can just, what's the quickest way to get there? I mean, what's the quickest way to hit the website or the Facebook page?
So firstonthemoon.org.
Okay, makes sense. So right there,
First on the Moon
right here as well, First on the Moon, whenever they have a chance to go. You brought, this is an example of the logo and everything, and I think and there's that iconic spaceman right there that we're all familiar with, that reflective mirrored headgear and that sort of thing, and of course the Earth in the background, that iconic shot. And you've got some other things that are kind of interesting too, and I'll test the cameraman here. He wasn't expecting this, but you know, the nice little this sticker, and of course a magnet again reflecting the logo and the activities that are going on. And I think it's because it's an achievement that resonates with everybody, and I think that's the thing that's really interesting, because these events don't come along. These kind of events don't come along that often, and anybody who was alive, well, you know, whatever age they happen to be now, remembers what that was like. And this is a chance, I think, to go back and learn more about it, revisit that, and understand, and as you said, see the history behind Neil Armstrong a little bit, and that sounds like what the community is going to do. Are there particular things, I mean, if somebody's interested in coming to Wapakoneta between now and then, or during this, there are particular things that you would say, hey, if you only have time for one thing, this would be the thing, or these are the 5 things you want to do, or the 10 things.
That's a hard question.
Putting you on the spot, I know.
That is a hard question.
But if you had to say, hey, look, I've got 2 hours, what should I do when I come down there for? Because obviously a museum, that's an automatic kind of thing. But you talked about all these other activities that are there as well. So there's lots to do.
There really is. You know, my gosh, I mean, the balloon rally, I mean, that would be a great thing to do. The parade is going to, we're going to try and kind of recapture that homecoming parade feel from 1969. And that's going to culminate with, you know, a community chicken dinner and, you know, other activities. That would be a great thing to do. If you're, you know, interested in live music coming towards closer to the 20th, when there are all kinds of bands playing at downtown as part of the chamber event. We're hoping to have NASA on the grounds of the museum broadcasting.
Because they have their own cable channel.
They do. So you know, that's still in the planning phases. That would be great to come in and see what they're going to present. Launch day is, I believe, the 18th, 17th or the 18th.
Yes.
There are a lot of events planned around that as well. And again, as we're confirming the schedule, you just kind of keep your eyes on the website and the Facebook page and see what's
because things are going to be added all the time. More
we're
events,
hoping.
more activities.
Yes, we're hoping.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and you mentioned that relating to things that what it was like in 1969, and we were talking between one of the segments about the fact that there's more computer power in your iPhone or your cellular phone, not to name a brand, than they had to get them to the moon and back. And you think about that they were running on very basic computer technology compared to what we have now, and yet they accomplished that. And all the things that preceded that and all the things that followed it, just a pretty incredible technical expertise. And it required them, the guy, Neil Armstrong, physically, manually landing the lunar module because of some things they didn't like when they looked at the ground and went, it's not really where I want to put this thing down. So they had to be a lot more reactive and not rely so much on technology. They had technology there to help, but in the end, he had to rely on his pilot training, his aeronautic, all that test pilot, all those previous missions to get that on the ground before he had the opportunity to step down that ladder to get to the moon. So it speaks to the level of training and the, I guess, as you said, the commitment to that was required, that in the end, they couldn't just turn it over to the computer and say, yeah, put me on automatic pilot and stop, drop me on the moon here. He had to do that manually, and that had to be quite an experience for everybody involved too. And yet, to have done that and gotten back and then still just be, in essence, go back to a regular life is just an incredible story.
I think it speaks volumes to the training program that NASA put together. Right. It speaks volumes to those not just that were astronauts, but those on the ground that were doing math by hand. And I can barely add 4 plus 4, but they were.
What was that again? Math by hand.
Yeah, math by hand. I mean, complicated math by hand. I think it's just an amazing testament to those individuals at NASA and our country and how we rallied around that vision that President Kennedy set for our country.
Yeah. So and obviously between now and July you have other activities going. We'd like to have you back again to talk more about this as we get closer to that big weekend, that big 10-day period when everything is intense there, and to make sure that people don't forget after that this was going on too. So you can go to First Man on the Moon, find it on
First
Facebook.
on the Moon.
First on the Moon, sorry. First on the Moon, Facebook and the website, and get all the information, and of course check back on that because things will probably keep being added. So Deb Zwez, Joshua Little, thank you so much, and much success with this, and thank you and to all the people who are putting this together, because it's one of those American iconic events that we shouldn't treat lightly. So appreciate the fact that you're not doing that. We'll be back next week on The Journal. You can check us out at WBGU.org, and we'll see you again next time on The Journal here on WBGU-TV.